Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Virgil Films. With over 25 years of distribution experience, Virgil has released such hits as Super Size Me and the Oscar-nominated Restrepo, along with a trove of indie treasures like Forks Over Knives, To Die For, 7 Yards, and Speed is Expensive. Now, you can find all of those films along with the entire Virgil catalog on any transactional platform out there like Amazon, Apple TV, YouTube, Tubi, and the rest. Are you a filmmaker and you're having trouble with distribution? Talk to Virgil. They work with every major platform directly, and they offer a variety of deals that fit with every filmmaker's needs, from standard distribution to service deals. They do it all. And they don't just distribute films, they elevate them. Truthfully, they're just really good people to work with. So if you want to learn more, head on over to virgilfilms.com and tell them Christian Taylor sent you. And now, on with the show. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Documentary First. I'm your host, Christian Taylor. This is an inside look at documentary filmmaking, and I am a documentary filmmaker myself. I sit down usually with storytellers from all over the world, and I talk to them about capturing real life one frame at a time so we can all become better filmmakers. But today, we have a very different exercise on our hands, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. We have somebody that's not a filmmaker, but he has a really interesting story to tell us, and we're going to follow up on last week's podcast. So I'm going to introduce him for a second, but I have a little housekeeping to do. So if you're new to our show, I'd like you to take a moment and subscribe to our podcast on any platform that you're on. I mean, of course, if you like what you're hearing by the end, and follow us on all of our typical social media channels. Also share anything, some of our little clips. We put up clips of our podcast, share them with your friends so that other people can discover our podcast. And if you're listening to this podcast, and you'd like to feel more like you're on the inside with us, you can watch the show on our YouTube channel. All right, here are the housekeeping notes before I get started. In case you didn't listen to last week's episode, we've started something new, and it's called the Documentary First, the Deep Dive. It's a little mini podcast where I take an insight that I learned from the week before, and I dig into it a little deeper. These episodes last about 15 or 20 minutes, and they're just as valuable, I think, for non-filmmakers as they are for filmmakers. So you need to check them out. And if you could take a moment also to review them if you like them, and also share them with your social media platforms, that would be amazing. We'd love people to discover those. And it would just, I think you're going to love them. Last week's what is particularly interesting, and it's kind of what we're going to follow up with this week. It was about failure. So check it out. Now, on with the show. Today, we've got Jake Schroeder with us. Jake, thank you so much for being here. It's really great to see you.
My pleasure. Good to see you too.
Jake and I have been friends for quite some time now. We met in Normandy, and we'll get to how we met in a few minutes. But first, let me read your bio. So Jake is a fourth-generation Colorado native. He fronted the local band Opie Gone Bad for about 20 years. He also sang the national anthem for the Colorado Avalanche over 1,000 times in 25 years. In 1999, he started volunteering with the Denver Police Activities League. And after beginning work there full-time in 2005 and becoming the executive director in 2014, he supervised the change to the D-Day Leadership Academy. This new mission for a long-established nonprofit was inspired by Jake's trips with World War II veterans to Europe in the 2010. He made a promise to them to continue their stories and to pass them down to new generations. Jake has 3 wonderful daughters whom I've all met and think they're amazing, a 1-year-old grandson who I've still yet to meet, but would love to, and lives with his partner, Brooke Ferguson, who's an awesome lady in Golden, Colorado. He loves getting to watch her perform as principal flutist. Is it flutist or flautist?
It's either, actually. Either or either. Yeah, I learned that first date. So.
Okay. With the Colorado Symphony, and helps raise funds for them. So are you saying the Colorado Symphony helps raise funds for the D-Day Leadership Academy, or you guys help raise funds for the Colorado Symphony?
She's very involved with the development for the symphony, and also we've been cooperating on some projects in Normandy, believe it or not, which is kind of cool. So
that's exciting. Well, I can't wait to
symbiotic
hear.
Relationship with our works.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, so let's start, and why don't you start the story about how we met?
Well, we probably should have met when you were first over in Normandy looking for your son, because we probably walked by each other. We were at the same ceremonies and a lot of the same events that went on. I was there with veterans, and you were there with your son, and ran into some locals there, and we probably, like, I was surprised when I watched the documentary, the full version of it, that I didn't see this big giant bald head walking behind you, or like get in the way of your shot or whatever, because we I was at many of those events. I started going in 2011 as a volunteer with another organization over there, and bringing veterans back, and then moved that into what we do now. But I was in Normandy a lot, and then we met in 2018, when you were filming the documentary proper, and we had just bought a new building in Sainte-Mère-Église, and had some folks from your documentary crew and producers and things like that were able to stay at the house, and that kind of ended up being evolving to a point where even part of the documentary was filmed in the front room. Charles Shea, an interview with Charles Shea, in front of our fireplace, or with the gaudy
That's
green
right.
marble on it. Yeah. So,
That's right.
and then since then
So
we've
right, I
done
forgot about all that.
right, we've done a lot of work together, and have
Yeah.
very similar missions, and I think that your documentary really captures something that I struggle to kind of explain to people when I talk about the magic of Normandy, and how wonderful of a place it is in so many ways. And your documentary really captured that really well, I think, for the significant part of it that relates to the World War II part of what Normandy really is. So yeah, and then we've stayed in touch and done charity stuff for each other, and done events and talks and all sorts of stuff. So you're the headliner, along with my friend Matt, who's a Pulitzer Prize winner. You're going to do a panel discussion at our event next week, which might be in the past when the podcast is watched by people, but I'm sure it went really well, and I'm excited for that. And we also have a cooperative effort that we're doing in September, that you've donated your services to help us raise some money for what we're doing. So
Yeah, I mean,
really
that
great.
kinda ties into one thing that I wanted to anchor our podcast around, which is last week I did this podcast with Quinlan Benson Yates. She's a filmmaker that did a film called Epic Bill, and we talked about that last week. And if you didn't listen to that podcast, everybody, you definitely need to do that. You need to see the film. It is about a man who lost his video business thanks to Netflix, had to reinvent himself midlife, and he became this extreme athlete, and he experienced a lot of success in the beginning and then a lot of failure, and he struggled with what that meant and how to handle that. And interestingly enough, that podcast and the way that Quinlan framed that really spoke a lot to me. I've been dealing with a lot of the same thing recently, a lot of this sense of failure. My film, like you said, has been important in a lot of people's lives. And at the same time, what is not unusual for documentaries, it has had a difficulty finding a greater audience or being hugely financially successful. It's kind of broken even, but it hasn't been hugely successful like some others. And so we're still struggling, to pay our team or pay its bills and things like that. And so listening to that podcast, I realized that there are other ways and other definitions of success. And coming to talk to you today, that I really need to stop focusing on dollars as a definition of success, and I need to focus more on what other ways how success looks in other ways.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, it has to be the essence of it. And I remember I used to tell people, because my band was local, but we traveled regionally, and we did very well. We were a funk rock band at a time and we did really well, but we were at a time when straight ahead rock was really much more prevalent. And I think if we had been a few years later, or different elements, and also the whole recording industry changed over the time that we were in the band together. There were no phones until we'd already had the band for 17 years or something like that. And whereas now you go to a show and everybody's got their phone. And so, like, everything changed, right? It used to be really expensive to go into a studio, and you used to have to do a promo pack. But I used to tell musicians, when I'd have a chance to talk to them, that with music, the road has to be worth it, because you will see hundreds of bands that are horrible make lots of money and then fade away after their first song and go nowhere. right? And you'll see people that are these legends that continue to write these songs that you just go, God, I'll never be able to write like that. So you can't really, and so if you're in a band with guys that you can't stand, or guys that don't have aligned goals, or that you don't feel like you're redeemed when you play or when you write, that it's just not worth it. You need to find a situation where because if you get into a situation like that, and I was lucky enough to be in that situation for almost all the years that I was in that band, wonderful human beings in my band and wonderful guys. And the music we played together was so good and so fun and so redeeming for me personally to get to do. We were really good that was worth it. We made our living playing music as long as we wanted to, and chose to shut it down after about 20 years. But so I think it's the same thing with any endeavor, right? Like, I mean, I don't know what it's like to be a banker, and I don't know what it's like to be. My brain isn't wired to have a metric for success like that, right? I mean, I have a partner who's a principal flute player in one of the best symphonies in the world, so that's a metric, right? Like, but she's also an artist and a musician, and so she's always striving to make the orchestra better and always striving to develop ways to get new crowds and ways to. I mean, so she's always working, and it's very fulfilling for her. So I think, and the metric that, for podcasters, right? The metric for podcasting is you look at people like, obviously they're the Rogans of the world, and they're these celebrities that have podcasts that make jillions of dollars or whatever. But you also got to look at like some of the top podcasts are these vapid morons that talk about sex positions and take money from presidential candidates to build sets and do stupid interview. Like, it's just not a good metric to weigh yourself
Yeah.
against for a podcast, right? Like, you're doing great work and you're featuring great stories, and it's like the old man in the sea, right? He doesn't come
Yeah.
back with the fish, you know?
That's true.
So I think, and that's the toughest part. Like, it's I just got back from Virginia Beach, right? So all the restaurants around that area are, not all of them, but many of them are military oriented and owned by veterans and owned by, a lot of old team guys and special forces guys, and these guys that really excelled at a pretty unique, vocation. And so there are all these sayings all over these restaurants that I saw, and I think one of them was always do this is a paraphrase, but always take the harder right action instead of the easier wrong action.
Mm,
Always
yeah,
do it. And that really sucks when you're in the middle of it, right? Like,
it does.
it's like the Stoic stuff that we've talked about before, where it's like, if you're upset, you are choosing to be upset on some level because you're uncomfortable because something out of your control is causing you discomfort. So you are choosing to be discomfort, that is the easiest thing to say to anybody in the whole world. I love saying that to my kids, right? Because it's like, it's super simple and like, I'm so wise. But to hear it, you're like, hey, screw you, man. Like, this is
Yeah,
different. Like, this is really hard. Like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills.
right,
Right.
right.
So it's a balance, but I think that's
Yeah,
kind of
when you tell somebody, I tell my kids this all the time. When somebody is raging mad, like I had one of my kids who was in charge of a soldier who was just, I mean, this soldier was horrible. And I mean, making my son's life, who's in charge of this soldier, miserable and doing everything she was not supposed to do and making him pay for it. And, he just was raging about what he could do differently and just so mad. And I just kept saying, it does not matter what this person does. It doesn't matter. All that matters is how you respond to this situation. And truthfully, if you let this person get under your skin, this person wins. Like, you can't control this person. You have to decide. All you can control is you. That's so easy for me to say. So easy for me to say. But when you're in it, it's nearly impossible.
Yeah. All the times that somebody said that to me, and I was like, you don't know what it's like. You don't know what you're talking, all of the times that happened, looking back, I'm like, yeah, I chose to make myself really miserable for a couple weeks worrying about X or Y. Like, the world continued to spin on its axis. When I was in Virginia Beach, it was really interesting. I went down and I was there for a couple days working with a volunteer for our program who's just an unbelievable human, veteran and a Navy veteran and special forces guy who's really, really been the tip of the spear and really, really worked really hard for this country and done some very difficult things. And he's just the kindest, gentlest,
He
guy.
is.
And he's got a new baby. and raising his stepsons, and his wife is just wonderful. And he's just a gift. But working really hard with him because he just decided he's going to rebuild our website for us and did a really,
Mm.
really wonderful job, and then was working on some things for the event together and doing things like that. So I walked down to the beach every night that I was there because I stayed on it's off season, so it's really nice to stay down by the water there and pretty inexpensive. And I just walked down there and the wind's blowing and it's like 30 degrees, so it's pretty cold. But I'm just looking at the beach and I'm thinking to myself, like, this is awesome. This beach has been here from the beginning of time. And every night it moves more sand than a million men on this beach could move with shovels. Every night it just does it with the waves, right? And I'm such a fart in the wind, compared to the power of what's going on with this beach. So calm down,
Yeah,
like dial it back, like look for the good stuff, look for the bright lights, right? And keep
that's what
going.
I absolutely love that about the beach. It's why I go there. I feel so small and healthily insignificant, and you realize that it has just been coming up to the sand and the shore every day since the beginning of time and just keeps doing it and on its own, and that I'm not in charge of that and I don't have to be. Yeah, it really kind of puts you in your place. Same thing when I'm flying. I look down over the world and I think, gosh, I'm so small. And I really make such a big deal out of things that I just need to let go. Yeah, perspective is a wonderful gift. And one thing I was thinking about as you were talking, when we as filmmakers, I was thinking about this about our relationship and just now when I was filming in your house, that was 2018. So that was we're going on what 8 years now,
8 years ago, yeah.
and yeah, it's crazy. But since that time, some filmmakers, they will make their films, I think, and move on. But a lot of documentarians that I know continue to have relationships with their subjects. And there's something about documentary filmmaking, and a lot of it is passion work. It doesn't pay a lot. It's not just me. Documentary filmmaking is hard work, and you do it because you care about the subject matter. You want people to know about what's happening, and you get really, really involved with the people that are in your story, and you don't just move on. And that absolutely happened with me. The people that are in my story are my dearest, closest friends. I almost have more friends in Normandy at this moment than I do anywhere in America, and including the veterans that are still alive. And I think that right there in itself is success. We brought together communities of people in Normandy, in fact, that never knew each other, survivors of the D-Day experience that never knew each other during that time, who were so happy to meet one another. So there were just gifts like that that happened because of us choosing to do this film, that in itself I feel like are a measure of success, and created things like what you talked about that we are doing this upcoming week. And let me just talk a little bit about what that is. You and I've tried to figure out for a long time, like, our missions are aligned. One of the things that you decided to do, and before we talk about this week, let's go back to what you did start. So you came into this Denver Police Activities League. Let's talk about what it was when you
Sure.
started it.
Yeah, it was a charity that was started in 1969, and it's all over the country, mostly in the eastern half of the country, but some in the west. And basically, the mission is to get police officers into communities where they wouldn't normally be in a non-law enforcement role. So it started off as cops coaching inner city kids in different sports and different things like that. And it still manifests that mission in most places. Denver really changed over the last 20 years that I was there or so, because it got to be, the political environment changed to where, officers weren't really backed up by downtown, and we stopped really having a lot of coaches that were cops. And that still meant that we had some really incredibly heroic human beings from different parts of a lot of these guys were guys that had been in trouble earlier in life and really wanted to be a good example. And that was the majority of the guys we had. We also had some real dingleberries that were still active criminals and brought guns to practice and stupid stuff like that that we had to manage. But we basically did inner city football leagues and basketball or baseball leagues and basketball and a bunch of other activities for about 4,000 kids a year. And that's the reason I got into that was from playing shows. And I would often hang out with the cop that worked the door in between sets just to stay out of trouble. Right. So I'm sober. And I think over the years, like that was something that I struggled with. And so to try and keep myself, because when I would get bored or get like, that's when I would go off and do dumb stuff. So I think just to have a safe place to kind of hang out and talk to somebody, I would go talk to the cop at the door and got to know a bunch of these guys really well and realized that these were really, really good people. The guys that I met, the men and women that I met that worked, they were, not all of them, but almost all of them, like, all but a couple of them were just really neat people that to a person joined the police force because they want to help people. That's what they said. They want to help people. That doesn't equate with this caricature that's being used, that's being abused a lot of times, like, oh, they're, blah, blah, blah. Almost every cop that I've ever met joined the police force wherever they are to help people. That said, there's nothing worse than a bad cop. And cops will tell you the same thing. But I got to know these guys, and they're like, "Hey, we volunteer for this thing called PAL. I coach football, or I coach baseball." So doing the anthem for as long as I did, I got to know a bunch of the players over the years, and a couple of them and I were out solving all the world's problems. And at like 4:30 in the morning, decided we were going to start a inner city youth hockey program. So I got this drunken, blurry check from this guy for $5,000, and went out and started an inner city program in like '99, and just got all these kids and got hockey gear from the NHL, and just kind of said, "Go play hockey," and let them figure out. It was really fun. It was very unorganized and super unorthodox, and I'm sure we took on a lot of liability that we didn't necessarily need to take on, but we escaped from it. We didn't have any the very first meeting we ever had at a gym at a middle school was some of the parents that had kids that were in football. They were all excited for us to do hockey because hockey became so big in Denver after the team moved here. And we've always had hockey teams in Denver, but when the Avalanche moved here, they won the cup the first year they were here, right? So everybody loved them.
Really?
Yeah, everybody loved them.
Where were they from before?
They were in Quebec City. They were the Nordiques. So our very first event we are going to have in this gymnasium at like 7:00 at night with all these parents and the west side of Denver, so mostly Latino parents and kids, and they were all excited about hockey. We had a bunch of balls and like sticks, playing ball hockey in the gym or whatever. The very first shot that one of these guys took hit a kid in the mouth and broke his two front teeth out.
Oh.
So that's how we started, right? And it was okay. The parents were really, really nice about it and took care of it. But that was how we started. And it just evolved into me volunteering over there since '99. And we did the inner city hockey, and then we kind of morphed into a sled hockey thing for disabled kids. They have two poles and they push, and we've got some really famous sled hockey players from Colorado. These two guys that were all state wrestlers were hit by a car changing a tire and lost their legs. And then they became sled hockey players and won the gold medal at the Paralympics multiple times. Yeah, they're Jerry and can't remember the other guy's name. And they're just the neatest guys. Anyway, volunteering, and then moved into working there full time. And we did football and baseball. Football, we had about 2,500 kids, and baseball, we had about 1,500 kids. And kind of as time went on, youth sports have really changed. And anybody that has a child in youth sports now knows it is an industry. And if you don't go to this camp, your kids might not start, because I run the camp too. And I start, and there's a lot of stuff he's got to learn. And I don't think he should play any other sports. He should stick with football, or he should stick with basketball, or stick with baseball. And some of these baseball kids are playing 100 games a year. And these poor little pitchers, I know they try and watch it, but
And it's not just camp we're talking about, it's travel sports.
it's outrageously expensive. So we had a low cost league and had kids, but we still had these kids that were specializing, and the parental behavior at fields all over, not just in our league with the inner city kids, but all over, became a real problem. And we had extra issues because we had a lot of gang members that were parents. And so we had to really watch it. And I'll tell you, the most reasonable people I ever dealt with at those fields were the most notorious gang members that we had,
Interesting.
because they don't want to, whatever goes on, they don't want to interrupt their revenue stream. So if somebody's uncle was acting up at a game, starting a fight or chasing the refs, a lot of times that stuff got managed by itself when I would go talk to one of these OGs and be like, "Hey, what do you want me to do?" And he'd be like, "I got it." And so they take care of it. But we still had a lot of, I mean, we took weapons off people all the time. We stopped fights every week. We called cars code 10, which is lights and sirens, to fields probably, I don't know, 15 times a year,
Oh my
which is like
gosh.
officer down level of calling police cars because we're outnumbered 1,000 to 1 there. And I'm not a cop. I was like, but then the cops were like, "Do you have your concealed carry permit?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "You got to carry it all the time." And I was like, "I'm in a band. Like, I don't want to, like, my God, and thankfully, and, I mean, I never had to think about using it or pulling it out or anything like that. It was a non-factor, but there were a couple of scary moments where the
Mm,
cops were like, "Come over here with me. I need you to stand here and watch that guy because he's got a gun and I'm going to try and take it off him." Stuff like that. Yeah. And then, as the concussion stuff became more prevalent, I really changed the way I feel about young players playing football and getting concussions. And I think there's no real, the way I feel now, I don't believe anybody should be playing tackle football until they're 16, till they're in high school. Kids can learn almost everything they need to know up to that point, positioning, plays, and it's a lot more fun for them. And we still have a bunch of meathead old coaches that were doing the Oklahoma drill, running these kids into each other's helmets like I did when I was growing up. That's now like just a
yeah,
concussion generator, right? And
yeah.
so we have these kids, I had my final year there, I had 4 parents fake doctor's notes allowing their kids back in after a concussion. So between that and the fact that our insurance went up by a factor of 8 in 1 year, right? We were it was not gonna have longevity. So we shut that down. I negotiated with Under Armour for like 3 years to do this flag product that they do called Under the Lights. It was gonna be great every Friday night, this flag thing and DJs and food trucks, and like it was great. Baseball, we'd finally, after 9 years of negotiating with Parks and Rec in Denver, we negotiated a deal to cooperate in our 2 leagues because they were redundant. So we are going to merge our leagues together with the city of Denver, who can afford fields and can afford referees and can afford all this stuff. And then we were getting ready to unleash that in 2019. We had a new chief, Paul Pazin, who was from Denver, played PAL, had high hopes for him, and he decided he was going to run for mayor or whatever he was going to do. So he was going to do his own branded inner city programming and pulled the cops out of PAL after 50 years.
Wow.
So, of course, never got around to it. And then COVID hit, and
COVID
he
hit.
was a very short tenured police chief in Denver, and really, But so I had a lot of, like you talk about the guy failing and failing and failing. Well, we kind of, we had to pivot and upset a lot of people and change our mission and do a lot of different things, and sold the building that I had built there with private funds, and here we are because I realized the value of what we started doing in 2015. We started bringing cops and kids and veterans back to Normandy. We'd rent a chateau.
Well, how did that I mean, okay, so you had this huge program, and you had all these kids, and then you're like, "Okay, I can't keep this up, so I'm shutting all that down," and how you just decide to go to Normandy? Like, that
Well,
seems
no,
like a huge
we
gigantic
started that
switch.
program before all that went down. We started it in 2015, and I shut the programs down. Shut football down in 2016. Got ready to do flag in 2019. Got ready. Baseball continued through those years. Got ready to do the cooperative program in 2019. So we had those programs still. And I came to PAL originally because I realized that these police were really neat people. But then I started to realize that these kids, Denver Public Schools is a disaster. They have a 30% minority graduation rate. They just did some testing after COVID, and 5% of their second graders can read or do math to grade level. I mean, it is a meat grinder.
Sounds like a documentary that needs to be made
I mean, pick a
somewhere in
city,
there.
right? Pick a city where the public school system is failing, and so these kids they're beautiful, and they're just as smart as anybody else, and it has nothing to do with the color of their skin or their economic level or anything like that. These kids are incredible, just incredible, and almost all their parents are equally as incredible. Just amazing. These parents work so hard to get their kids up above where they were, and so I just felt like it's a really valuable lesson for them because the kids that they pulled over to drafted or that joined up after Pearl Harbor were the same. We were 80% agrarian and 20% lived in cities in 1939, and it's the reverse now. But these kids were just the same. and they were close to the same age as these kids. I tell these kids in high school, like, they were your age. We go to Omaha Beach and go to the cemetery at Colorado up above there, and the gravestones. I'm like, that kid was 17, and they have a moment. And the children that are being let down by our public schools are just as beautiful as any children in the whole world, and they deserve everything. So I really feel like these kids already have some leadership skills that a lot of kids don't, and so for them to see an example, like, to give them some credibility and some legitimacy to how they feel about being leaders is really important, and also to give them a metric. They have to fundraise for their airfare and help out with that. So
Yeah,
to
so describe I mean, you're running ahead of yourself, so
Yeah, oh
describe
yeah, shocker. Yeah, I'm always
so describe your vision for the program when it started. You said you took veterans and police team over there, and
because that evolved from the discussions I had with veterans. Veterans and police officers, combat veterans and police officers can have conversations very quickly with each other because they're both put in a position where they have to make split-second decisions where there is not a right answer. Somebody's gonna get killed. Somebody's gonna get hurt. And it's the same, and that's not a conversation I can have with a veteran. I've never, thankfully, been put in a position like that. Cops all the time have to do that. So that was an easy one. And then knowing that these kids were coming over, so I brought these kids over with these cops because the veterans really, really wanted to tell the stories to kids, really want them to be around. And I saw the beauty and the magic of that. And I also knew that we had 3 or 4 years to get the veterans into the program because they were 90 when I was going over with them at the beginning of the twins, and they were
and so
95.
how did you pay for all this? How did that pitch
Well, I
go, you
raised it.
know?
I raised the money with events, and then after COVID, we sold our building, so we've got some money in the bank. And after COVID, it was really important to our board director and myself that we reestablish the program, dip into our savings, make sure it happens for a couple years, and get it out there and make it a program that is successful and has the kinks worked out, which we did. And now we're back to kind of like, okay, we're doing one scholarship program this summer, and we're going to kind of build from that. We need to. So, yeah, I feel like for years, like, we're right on the edge of being able to raise all the money we need to raise to fill the summer with these kids that normally wouldn't conceive of going to another continent.
And so how do the kids get to go, and how many sessions do you have? And talk to us about what the program actually looks like.
Yeah, so for this summer, we have one scholarship program, and the kids can apply on our website, which is ddayleadershipacademy.com. And they apply and they get interviewed by our board and by some of our volunteers. And we pick, 10 to 12 kids that come over, and we have some chaperones. And a lot of the kids, we have to get passports for them, which is, we bring these kids from Richmond. That we have a school counselor in Richmond who's an incredible lady. And she, you know, the kids that she sent, most of them haven't even left Richmond, let alone left the United States. So we get them passports. They come over to France, and we do 7 nights in Normandy. We used to do a couple nights in Paris, and then we kind of realized it just wasn't really aligning with our mission. And I also feel like we were really dodged a bullet with, 17-year-old kid can get into a club in Paris if they really wanted to. Thankfully, we never had that happen. But I just don't feel like that's really anything that we need to concentrate on is getting kids. Kids can come back to Paris, but they go to Normandy for 7 nights. They have family style meals, French meals that are made by maybe the nicest person in the whole world, Michelle Coupé.
Who is my co-producer on The Girl Who Wore Freedom.
And we tour around and we talk about battle sites, and we have 5 elements of leadership that we equate and relate to them, to the stories and the places and the people that we talk about each day.
Which are?
We talk about leading from the front. We talk about total commitment to mission. We talk about chaos. We talk about preparation, and we talk about empathy. And we've kind of came up with those. I kind of came up with those over COVID with some of the veterans and gamed it out. And it's conceivable that they'll change, and it's conceivable that we'll get somebody better to do it than me. But at this point in time, that's where we stand. And so it's really easy to teach a lesson of empathy when we talk about Waverly Woodson, a Black soldier who was treated basically like an animal, saving the lives of 300 white GIs on Omaha Beach under fire on D-Day, right? Or you see the bloodstains in the pews at Angoville-la-Plaine from German soldiers and from American soldiers, that 2 20-year-old medics from the Hunters saved the lives of 84 people, right? Why in the world would they work on Germans who were the ones that probably killed and wounded their friends?
Such a
Well,
great,
that's an
great
easy
story.
empathy lesson, right? Or we talk about
Yeah.
preparation. We're in Sainte-Mère-Église, so the paratroopers are that's where they excuse
Bless
me,
you.
that's where the 82nd, the 101st kind of sowed their oats. And so it's really easy to talk about preparation and the fact that these guys were way off course and all over the place and still figured out how to get to where they were getting, still figured out how to accomplish their mission. And chaos used to be something that I stressed about teaching. And now it's like, well, remember the day that COVID started and your parents were home from work for no reason and you didn't have school anymore and nobody knew when it was going to start up again. And you could wear a mask into the restaurant, but could take it off when you sat down because the virus made a deal with the government or whatever. Like it's really easy to explain, like things that you just don't expect are going to happen. Like things that you wouldn't even conceive of in your life are going to happen to you. So COVID has been a great teaching tool for teaching the
Yeah.
chaos because everybody's going to have it. Leading from the front, we have some great examples there. Dick Winters and the very easily accessible stuff like Band of Brothers and a bunch of other stories that aren't told in movies or books. And total commitment to mission. Talk about why we threw so many men and resources right at the teeth of the German Atlantic Wall because we had to save the world.
Yeah, it's interesting, the more you talk about that, the more I realize this doesn't just need to be a middle school, high school leadership, camp. It needs to be any adult
Well, that's what we're doing now, right?
person.
So
Yeah.
that's what we're
Yeah,
moving
so
into, and you're helping
yeah,
me with
so
that. So,
let's bridge that. So one day I showed up and you had I don't know why I was there at this certain time, but you had a week going on and you're like, come on in and meet these kids. They're watching your movie. And I didn't even know this was going on. So I guess you start some sessions that way.
yeah, we do. It's a really great way to kinda teach anybody what's really going on in Normandy, and I think that's just part of the magic in Normandy, but it's a for Americans, to ask about Normandy, the first thing they think of is D-Day, unless they're culinary arts students or whatever, but for the most part, Americans are like, "Oh, Normandy," and they think, a lot of people say Normandy Beach, or they say, they don't really know, but Normandy
Yeah.
is
Right.
is magical. The Hundred Years' War was there, and there are Viking remnants and Roman ruins, and the greatest salt of the earth people I've ever met in my life, and the cleanest food I've ever eaten, and the most beautiful terrain, it's like there's so much to it there, but the poignant lessons, as Thomas, our caretaker and one of our guides likes to say, the only exciting thing to happen in Normandy in the last 1,000 years was June 6th, 1944, right?
Right.
Which is kind of comforting, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, that I was really humbled to see that you were using the Girl Who Wore Freedom to kick off that lesson to introduce these kids to what is actually going on in Normandy. But it goes to the theme of today's podcast, which is, the definition of success, which is this film shows what the French do. If you haven't seen The Girl Who Wore Freedom, you can watch it on Amazon, Apple TV, Vudu, YouTube, and you get this understanding. You can see D-Day through the French eyes. I was so humbled when I got there, and I mean, I've been in government life, and my father was in the Reagan administration. I lived in Washington D.C., for 15 years, and I thought I understood. I thought I was a very patriotic person, and I was clueless when I got there. That was so grateful for their freedom that they treated me as if I'd liberated Normandy, and they were worshiping my son, and he was just a 20-year-old American soldier, and the other units that liberated them, not to mention the veterans that were there, and they knew more about our military and their patches and their units than I could ever imagine. And then I learned over the last 8 years, I mean, it wasn't just Normandy. It's all over the small towns and villages in France. And it's not just France, it's Belgium and the Netherlands and Luxembourg and, Holland. I mean, everywhere. And, Germany, even. I mean, crazy how grateful our allies have been and continue to be, even despite what is happening today and why they're so heartbroken. I mean, I'm receiving texts and messages all the time about what's happening and how heartbroken they are, and it's not going to dim. It's not like they're canceling the Normandy commemorations this summer because America has turned their back on them. They never will, because they're not going to stop honoring these men that sacrificed and gave everything for their freedom.
Yeah, it's a totally separate issue, and it's the world's always going to be changing, and it's we look at go back to 1960 when Charles de Gaulle called Eisenhower and told him he wants every American soldier off French soil immediately, and Eisenhower said, "Well, you're going to have to give me a few days to dig up all the boys in Normandy." And that was the end of that conversation. So things have been worse, and things will go back and forth, and things are, some things might seem really bad at the time and then end up being a blessing later on. We don't know.
They will.
But
So,
but
out
yes,
of this,
you're right. Like, I wanted to say something about this relates to the podcast part of this, where you strive and you strive and you strive and you don't know what you're striving for. And in your documentary, Madame Renaud didn't start cleaning up graves for publicity. She didn't start cleaning that up to create this tourist industry for D-Day over in Normandy. She did it because they were wrecked with all these young men that they saw every day get buried in their backyards, that gave them their freedom back. And we, as Americans, we are so fat and happy over here. We take freedom completely for granted.
well, I don't think we can define what freedom is, because I don't think we truly understand or know what freedom is, because I don't think you can until you've had it taken away. And we have an inkling because of COVID. Like you said, it was a great teacher. We have an inkling, but not really.
No, it was almost like a farce. It was like a Monty Python skit of having your freedom taken away. Like, you
Yeah.
can't ride your motorcycle because of COVID. Like, what?
Yeah.
Or like, well, nobody else can go to the beach, but I'm going to go to the French Laundry with my buddies and not wear a mask because I'm the governor, and nobody's going to ever find out. Oops, like, it was a joke.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah.
joke, and Sweden didn't do anything. And Sweden's like, hey, look, our mortality rates are way lower than everybody else. What do you know? So yeah, I think you're right. And hopefully we never find out. There's a shelf life and a half life on freedom. And I think it was Reagan that said it's only one generation away at any time from going
It's
away.
so true. When we forget cost, and nobody alive remembers their relatives being slaughtered, and they begin realizing they don't realize the cost. And so it doesn't seem expensive. And so, anyway, all that to say, beginning these weeks with these kids, you've realized, yes, we do need to keep raising money. This program is important, and we need to find ways to do that. You have purchased this home in Sainte-Mère-Église, which is sort of this breadbasket of the Normandy experience, as I tell people. And it makes it great because it's this centerpiece where you can kind of get everywhere else from easily. And it's a place where you can house a lot of people. You've designed it that way. And so you have the ability to kind of bring people over in groups. And you thought, well, go ahead, tell what your idea is.
Well, we all along we wanted to do, the house just kind of came up, and we got an incredible deal on the house, and we've spent a lot of money fixing it up, and it's really in great shape now, and we really have gotten it centered around being a place where everybody's comfortable. So, but we always kind of had in the back of our minds that we were going to do adult programming over there as well, whether it's just tourism where people donate to the charity. So I do a guided tour of them in Normandy, or leadership programming, because, a lot of these executives are required to take, a leadership program every year. And so that's that's eventually the strata that we're shooting to get into. And it takes time to get into that. So we're working on that. We also have, so like we have, your tour that you're going to do one for us in September, but then hopefully we'll continue to do more where if you see the documentary and then get to go over to France with you for a tour and see these places that inspired you to make that documentary and meet some of the people that were in it and hear some of the stories on site. I can't imagine a better way to really get a very true idea of what that area was like during World War II. But we're also looking at doing like culinary couples tours. We're looking at doing a couples yoga retreat beyond just adult leadership. And then we're doing family tours. We do a cooperative venture in August now. We did our first one last year and it was wildly successful, where we offer, a room to another nonprofit to auction off. And we bring two, Brooke, my partner, who's one of the one of the best flute players in the world, and a classical guitar player named Masakazu Ito, who is one of the top classical guitarists in the world, and is also the conductor for the Colorado School of Mines Orchestra. And then I come sing and apparently get a tax break for everybody and do a couple songs. But we do these classical performances in the church and in our backyard and in gardens. And so these people get to come over, see the area, eat the food, experience life in Normandy, and then have these private concerts in these beautiful settings. And it was really successful. So we're going to do more of that this year. We're actually expanding it. So we're looking at all options, and fundraising is really changing, as you know. And we've tried a little bit of everything, and we're just going to keep, like you said, it's the journey is the goal, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're doing. We're auctioning off, and I'm so thrilled to be a part of this. We're auctioning off next week, which when people listen to this, it will probably be past. But we're auctioning off, I think, eight. Is it eight couples trips, or is it what is it?
We're going to auction off a couples trip at the
Okay,
dinner. Yeah, and we've got 8 available. So
eight available.
yeah, so I think we've already sold a couple of them, and if we have a couple of
Really?
big bidders that go back and forth against each other, then maybe we'll offer a second one. But
Yeah, great.
it's an opportunity for people to donate some money and get their write off, and then also have a really incredible experience, a once in a lifetime experience.
Yeah, and so I've designed a tour, a Girl Who Wore Freedom tour, and I will go over in the fall, and I have designed it to kind of follow the movie and explain from my experience what happened. And what's different about it is that it is going to be, as an American, going over to realize what I learned and how I was changed by the people I met and the experiences that I went through. And I'll be able to introduce them to people in the film. Danny, the Girl Who Wore Freedom, has agreed to meet and talk and share her story because they have been supportive. She and Flo have been so supportive of your mission and love you so much. So we have amazing opportunities right now to do these things, and it's part of just continuing to share this mission. And as I heard you talking about your own leadership goals, those same leadership goals that you're teaching about apply in filmmaking. Like, every single one of those things are things that I have talked about in over the podcast, that things that directors and producers need to learn and need to manage over the course of a filmmaking production. And so we could take those same pillars and do a producing directing workshop there in Normandy for 7 days, 10 days, whatever. And I also thought about doing a creative retreat where we go over and write. I mean, it's one of the most contemplative, beautiful places ever to do one of those sort of things. So other than just the Girl Who Wore Freedom tour, my mind is spinning about ways to continue to create the mission or carry the mission and teach people, use that beautiful place. And I was thinking about this morning. I would like to come back and just be there myself, because I would love to enjoy the beach in the summer so I could take advantage of what the men died for, in a time where I could really use that beach as it was, as they gave their lives for it to be used.
And that's one thing that people, if they hear this podcast, might be like, well, but doesn't that seem disrespectful to be on the beach? And I will tell you, that's how I felt. And I asked no less than 20 veterans as I went over there with them, and 4 of them on the beach at different times. Anthony Malin, who was an LST driver that landed at Utah, and we were down at Utah Beach, and he saw these kids playing and just started crying. And I said, how do you feel about people recreating on Utah Beach? And he looked at me like, that's why we came. That's what they all said.
Yeah.
So
That's the only reason I said that. I've heard them say the
yeah,
same thing, and I thought
yeah,
it's so logical. Like, we don't think about it. We see it as hallowed ground, but when you put yourself in the mind of the veteran and you think about what they went through,
right,
to
right.
give those people that freedom to play on the beach, you're like, "Oh my gosh,
Your children
I
lost.
want
Yeah,
I wanna play there for them because that's the most honorable thing you could do?"
right. It's as Americans, we're stupid, and we don't have a very much of a grasp of anything else, and we love to be judgmental. So one of the things I'll always listen for when I'm there for D-Day stuff is Americans getting a couple beers in their belt and saying like, well, we saved you. Like, hey, come here. You didn't save anybody. Like, your granddad might have, but you didn't do anything. So dial it back a little bit. And so the same people would be like, well, I think that's really disrespectful. Like, well, I actually talked to like more than 20 of the guys that actually fought on these beaches. And that was their favorite thing about being at these beaches was seeing children squealing and laughing and running in the water and playing. So that's everybody can recreate in Normandy on the beaches with a clear conscience, you know?
I just feel so incredibly blessed that we have had this opportunity to meet these incredible veterans. And the thought that I was able to film them and hear their stories and save them. And not only that, French survivors that we have Jean Marie's story in there and Danny's story and Henri Jean, Maurice Lecour, and Denise Leconte. I mean, I'm just so incredibly grateful that we were able to capture those before they were gone.
Incredible.
It's just incredible, yeah. So, all of that to say, you filmmakers that are listening, your films may not be making a lot of money, but it does not mean they should not be made. It does not mean that you should consider yourself a failure. You just need to fail sustainably. You need to realize that courage is a muscle, so you need to keep practicing courage, and you need to keep getting up when you feel like you have failed, and you need to be filmmaking in a responsible way. So that means Joe Amade has said, my distributor has said, don't make a documentary right now for more than $250,000 because it's going to be hard to break even right now in this market for more than that. Make sure that you're planning backwards, figure out who the market is, who's going to buy your film, where you're going to sell it, et cetera, et cetera. Make sure you save tons of money for marketing and build that into your budget, before you ever begin. So make sure that you're planning these things out before you ever begin. So just be really responsible in your filmmaking. Know that when you invest your heart into your subject matter, there are going to be relationships that you could cultivate for a lifetime. You could be changed. My life has never been the same. It will never be the same. And I don't want it to be. I don't want it to be. And I may never make another movie. Well, I will. I'm halfway done with the Heroes of Parenton. I will do more, but even if I never did, I will go to my grave knowing that I have accomplished, I think, what God put me on this earth to do.
Well, that's authentic, right? That's if there's not it's very obvious that you're very authentic about what you think about that and what you said about the people of Normandy. And that's one of the easiest things that people can pick up on is if you're not being authentic. So you talked earlier about like documentary, like other documentarians and if you're not moved by it, here's a quick little story. So I grew up in Colorado, right? So I was born in 68, 1984, this quarterback that got drafted by the Colts somehow ends up in Denver. The greatest, John Elway comes here and is like growing up with that guy through high school. And I mean, he was the biggest celebrity in Colorado. And as I got older and I started singing the anthem at Bronco games and doing stuff with the
No
band,
way.
yeah, and doing stuff like we played for the Broncos,
Oh my
Super
gosh.
Bowl parties and things like that, and got to know some of those guys. And so, but my first John Elway moment was in the elevator at the Cherry Creek Mall, right? And it's this glass elevator, and I get on there, and it's just John and I look at him, and I'm like, "How you doing?" He goes, "Hey, Jake." And I was like, my dad would have just died, right? He was already dead, but he would have died again. And he goes, "Hey, Jake." I go, "John, I have a question for you." And he's like, "What?" And I was like, because he just gets bugged. I go, give me a quick bullet point success for charity events. Because he was running the John Elway golf tournament that
How
was
old
huge.
was
It was
he?
televised. I don't know. This is probably early 90s, I think.
Okay.
And he said, okay. He goes, all right, good question. He goes, first of all, pick a charity that you really believe in. Otherwise, nobody's going to help you. He goes, that's first. He goes, second, don't lose money. Don't lose any money, but don't worry about making any money right off the bat because it'll come. And he said, and make sure everybody has a really good time. He goes,
Hmm.
and that's how to be successful. Just make sure everybody really has fun and think outside the box. And so that seems like that, from what I hear from you, I don't know the first thing about filmmaking, which is really good for everybody. Right. But that sounds like it transfers pretty well, right? Be authentic.
Yeah.
Pick something that you really love, Don't get stupid and lose a bunch of money. Do something, pick a project that really means something to you, because people can tell, and make sure everybody has a really good time. Make sure you communicate what moves your heart about that. And I think that The Girl Who Wore Freedom, and I'm sure your forthcoming documentaries are all going to be the same. You're kind of like me. I couldn't pretend not to like
No.
or dislike something. I'm not very good at
No, I'm not good at pretending. I am an actress, but I try to be authentic even there. And I do think that you are 100% right. Yeah, authenticity comes through the camera, whether you're an actress or whether you're a filmmaker. And our job is to move people's hearts. And, that's the ultimate goal. If we're wanting to do something, if anything is worth doing, it is worth doing well. And our goal truly is to change people. And you do that through moving their hearts and their minds. And I appreciate that. And I do think that, it's really, really true. You've got to put your whole heart into it. And another thing I'll add is I really try to love my crew and make sure that they are on board and we together operate as a family and we all enjoy what we're doing so that we can do that as a unit, and there's not a lot of infighting, that we're just, I don't know, that we're all swimming in the same lane or we're all paddling in the same direction in the boat. I think that's really important as well.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, everybody. Well, I will say this one thing. It is time for us to go, but we have not done our DocuVue Déjà Vu. So we're going to head right into DocuVue Déjà Vu. And I'm going to give you 2 films. This is where I recommend 2, or I usually ask the guest, but I didn't put you on the spot. So I'm going to recommend 2. One is, did you see Elway to Marino? Speaking of John Elway. Oh my gosh, I love that 30 for 30. That's a ESPN 30 for 30. I don't know where you can see it, but if you haven't, you should see it. It's the best one. And then did you see Miracle, The Boys of 80?
I did, yeah.
Oh my gosh, it just came out. It's on Netflix. Phenomenal film. It covers the 1980 Winter Olympics, the boys that beat Russia. So it's a great film to catch, especially now during the Winter Olympics. So, all right, everybody. Thank you, Jake, for being here. Yeah, go.
There's one called Cold War on Ice, and I think you can watch it on YouTube now. It's about the Summit series that people don't know about in the States very much, but Canada played 8 games against the Soviet Union in 1972, and it was a war. It was a battle, and it's one of the most entertaining. If you're a hockey fan, it is one of the most entertaining things you could ever watch. It's called Cold War on Ice.
Okay, thank you for that one. My husband's going to love that. We're big Blackhawks fans. So.
Oh, you'll love it then. Esposito.
I wish I'd have known you when you were singing for the Avalanche. I would have come out just to hear that. Well, I see the Blackhawks and the Avs play.
I just Milli Vanilli'd it most of the time anyway. So
all right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to Documentary First, where we believe everybody has a story to tell, and you can be the one to tell it. Bye, everybody. Hey, everybody. If this conversation meant something to you, the single best thing you can do to support us takes about 10 seconds. Hit subscribe wherever you're listening right now. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. Subscribing is what tells the algorithm to show us to other filmmakers who need these conversations. And if you're on Apple Podcasts and have a minute, a quick review goes a really long way. We're a small, independent show, and every review helps new filmmakers find us. So, this podcast is brought to you by Documentary First Productions. And if you want to go a little bit deeper and learn more about us, visit documentaryfirst.com. There you can watch some of our award-winning films, you can grab some of our merch, including some coffee we just released, and support the work we're doing to preserve history and to bring some exciting stories to the world. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time. Follow Documentary First on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. This podcast was produced by Documentary First, edited and mixed by Jason Hoban, with music by Jeff Kurtenacker.